My name is Ann Whitfield. I'm 69 years old. I retired in March of 2021, on schedule, exactly the date Frank and I had written on the spreadsheet. And yes, there was a spreadsheet. Frank made it. I've talked about it on here before, and if you haven't seen that video, I'll link it somewhere. The date was circled. The budget columns were filled in. The national park list was clipped to the front page with a binder clip, which was exactly the kind of thing Frank did and which I used to tease him about, and which now strikes me as one of the most Frank things I can picture. The only thing that wasn't ready was that Frank had died in October of 2019, a Saturday, in the yard. So I retired on the date we had chosen together, and I retired alone. And I want to tell you what that first year actually looked like. Not the summary. Not the version where I skipped to the part where things got better. The real year. What surprised me. What I figured out too late. What hurt in ways I expected and in ways I absolutely did not. And what I wish, genuinely wish, someone had said to me before I got there, or at least while I was in the middle of it. I'm on my pension and Frank's Social Security survivor benefit. Together, it comes to $3,130 a month. I want to be honest about the numbers because I've always believed that vague isn't helpful. That's what I have. That's what I work with. And in that first year, I learned more about what that number actually meant, day to day, week to week, month to month, than I had in all the years we spent building toward it together. This is the part nobody puts in the retirement brochure. They don't put in the widowed part. They don't put in the alone part. They put in a couple walking on a beach at golden hour. And that's a fine image, but it wasn't my year. And I think my year is worth talking about honestly. The specific fear, and I'll name it plainly because I found that naming a thing is the beginning of being able to carry it, was this. We had planned something together. Frank and I had talked about retirement for probably 15 years. What we'd do, where we'd go, the national parks prioritized. He prioritized everything, which I found mildly irritating at the time, and now find I miss with a specificity that still catches me off guard. The rhythm of the days. Who would cook on which mornings? We had a shared picture of it, a detailed one. The kind you build when you've been married long enough to have the same future. And I walked into that future and he wasn't there. You wake up and the house is quiet. Not the quiet of a Sunday morning when someone is still sleeping. The other kind of quiet. The kind that has weight to it. And you think, and I thought this more times than I can count in that first year, I don't know how to do this. Not the budget, not the calendar, not the logistics. I mean this, the specific this. The daily fact of doing something that was supposed to be ours and doing it as mine. I'm not going to give you a 5-step plan. I don't have one. And I'm not sure I'd trust one if I did. What I'm going to do is tell you what the year was actually like, what I learned from it, where I went wrong, and where I got it right without knowing I was getting it right. That's all I can offer. I find it's usually enough. I was in the kitchen. It was a Tuesday morning in April, about a month into retirement. Standing at the counter with my tea, and I was thinking, what do I do now? Not dramatically, I want to be clear about that. Not in crisis. Just genuinely, practically, standing there in the morning light thinking, what do I do now? Because for 44 years, the answer to that question had been supplied automatically. First by the school schedule, then by the curriculum office, then by the consulting work, and woven through all of it, every single year of it, by Frank. The rhythm of someone else in the house, the sound of him in the morning, the coffee he always made. He made the coffee every single morning of our marriage. That was just his thing. That I couldn't bring myself to smell for a long time after he died, because it took me somewhere I wasn't ready to go. I stood at that counter for probably 10 minutes. That doesn't sound like a long time. It felt long. And I thought, Frank would have had an opinion about what I should do today. He always had a list. He always had a next thing. He was never at a loss for where to put his energy. Never once in 40 years did I see Frank Whitfield standing at a counter wondering what came next. I was at a complete loss. That was when I understood, not intellectually but in my body, the way you understand something when it finally stops being abstract, that I had not retired into freedom. I had retired into a silence I didn't know how to fill yet, and that the filling of it was going to be the actual work of that year, whether I'd signed up for it or not. There are 5 things I want to go through. 5 things that first year taught me the hard way. Things I wish someone had said plainly before I walked into it. Some of them are practical, some of them are harder to categorize than that, but all of them are true, and I think honesty is more useful here than comfort. The first thing is about structure, and I say this as a former teacher, so take it with that context. I spent my entire professional life inside a structure that somebody else designed and I inhabited. The school day, the school year, the curriculum calendar, 37 years of knowing at any given moment what was happening next and why. That structure was so constant I had stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing a sound that's always there. What I didn't understand before I retired, and this embarrasses me a little because I should have thought it through, is that I was losing 2 structures at once, not one. When Frank died in 2019, I lost the structure of being someone's wife, the morning coffee, the evening news, the back and forth of a shared house, the way 2 people create a rhythm together without even discussing it. That structure was gone a full year and a half before I retired. And then in March 2021, the work structure went too. And I was standing in April wondering what to do because I had nothing left telling me. I tried to build a schedule on paper. I have a notebook. Frank gave it to me about a year before he died, plain green cover worn now at the corners, and I've been writing in it ever since. I tried writing a daily schedule. 7 o'clock, walk. 8 o'clock, breakfast and tea. 9 o'clock, something useful. The mornings held. The mornings I could manage. But here's what I figured out. A schedule you write for yourself is not the same as a structure that matters to someone else. The school schedule worked because other people's days depended on you showing up. Your notebook schedule has no one to notice if you drift from it. And I drifted. By 11 o'clock most mornings, I had wandered off whatever I'd written down, and I was sitting in this chair, Frank's chair, which is where I film now, which has its own whole history, and the day was just sitting there with me, open and shapeless. What actually helped, and it took me about 4 months to find it, which feels longer when you're inside it, was other people who expected me at a specific time. Not friends who said we should get together sometime. Actual commitments. The Tuesday morning Bible study at church. The Thursday volunteer shift at the elementary school reading program. Things on the calendar that someone else's morning depended on me showing up to. That's what replaced the structure that work had given me for 4 decades. Not a list I made for myself. Obligations that were real to someone other than me. I think that distinction matters more than it sounds like it does. The second thing is money. And I want to slow down here and be precise, because I've always believed that precision is an act of kindness when the subject is money and people are trying to make real decisions. Frank and I had planned our retirement budget for 2 people. He ran the numbers. He was the one who ran the numbers. I reviewed them. That was our system, and it worked. And the plan made sense for 2. 2 people's groceries, 2 people's car insurance, 2 people's life, shared and split the way a shared life gets split. I am 1 person. And the math shifted in ways I didn't expect, in both directions. My income is $3,130 a month. I want to say that clearly. My mortgage is paid off. Frank made sure of that before he died. Not dramatically, just as a quiet priority over years, and it is a gift I did not fully appreciate until I was living on a fixed income alone. Not everyone has that, and I know it. My property taxes and insurance together run about $480 a month. Medicare, with my supplemental coverage, is around $220. Groceries I track carefully. I spend between $250 and $300, which still feels like too much for one person, and Frank would have agreed with that assessment and had a specific opinion about which items were responsible. What I was not prepared for, what I don't think you can fully prepare for, was the irregular expenses. The things that don't appear in monthly budgets because they don't happen monthly. The car needs something. The water heater. Last September, a section of the roof needed repair. $4,200. I sat at the kitchen table for a quiet moment after I got that estimate. Just sat there with the paper in my hand. Frank would have handled that call. Not because I was incapable. I made the call. I got 3 estimates. I made the decision. I was fine. But because house things were his department, and I was walking into his department alone, without training, later in life than anyone would choose to start. I think a lot of women who are in my situation, who manage certain parts of the household and relied on a partner for other parts, walk into widowhood and retirement simultaneously and find whole categories of life that need to be learned from scratch. Learning from scratch at 69 is possible. I want to say that clearly. It just takes more patience than you'd like, and occasionally more money than you'd planned. The third thing is loneliness. And I want to be careful here because I think the word loneliness gets used for several different experiences that are actually quite different from each other. There's the general kind, not having enough people. I had some of that. When you've been half of a couple for 40 years, parts of your social life were built around the couple. Other couples, dinners, things you did together that don't reconfigure automatically when you're suddenly one. That was real, and I'm not going to minimize it. But that's not the loneliness that got me in that first year. The one that got me was more specific. It was the loneliness of doing something alone that was supposed to be done together. Frank and I had talked about retirement the way some people talk about a trip they've been planning for years. The national parks, prioritized. Great Smoky Mountains first because it was the closest, then work our way west. We'd talked about renting a small RV for some legs of it. We'd talked about how much we'd cook versus eat out on the road. We had built a picture, a real picture with details in it. I retired into a picture with one person missing from it. That specific kind of grief. I think of it as retirement grief, which isn't a phrase I've heard anywhere, but it's the closest I can get, is different from missing Frank in the general daily way. I missed him generally every day. That's just the constant. But this was something layered on top of that. The grief of watching a shared future arrive without the person you shared it with. And some days it arrived quietly, almost companionably, like he was nearby enough to notice. And other days it arrived hard. And in that first year, I could not predict which kind of day it was going to be until I was already in it. I took myself to the Smoky Mountains last October, alone. 2 nights in a small inn outside Gatlinburg. Drove up to Klingman's Dome on a Tuesday morning with almost no one else around. Cloud cover low. The kind of view that looks like it belongs in a different century. And I stood there and I talked to Frank a little. I do that sometimes. I'm not embarrassed about it. I think he would have said it was worth the drive. He would have had a specific opinion about the visitor center. He always had opinions about visitor centers, and he was usually right about them, which was its own kind of annoying. The fourth thing is the house. And I'll say up front that I'm still inside this question, so I'm not coming to you from the resolved side of it. My daughter Jen thinks I should sell. Her reasons are genuine. It's a lot of house for one person. The maintenance, the yard that Frank kept up, and that I am managing with variable success, the fact that she lives 3 hours away and worries about me in ways that are deeply loving and occasionally suffocating, which I say with complete affection because that's exactly how I worry about her too. My son David thinks I should stay. He thinks the house is stability, and that stability matters right now. They've both made their case to me several times, in slightly different words, and I love them both for caring, and I have not yet made the decision. What that first year taught me about the house is this: the evenings are the hardest part. Not the mornings. I've figured out my mornings, the walk and the tea and the Bible study Tuesday and the reading program Thursday. The mornings have shape now. Not the afternoons, which feel better than they used to. The evenings. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, the light going soft and low. Frank and I would have been making dinner, or watching something, or just in the same room, which doesn't sound like much until it's gone, and you understand that being in the same room with someone you love is actually quite a lot. That's when the house is most itself, and when his absence is most itself too. I don't fully understand why evenings specifically. I've thought about it more than I'd like to admit. It might be the light. It might be that evenings were always the shared part. Mornings we sometimes went in different directions. Afternoons we had our own things. But evenings we were together. That was the part of the day that was ours. And so that's the part of the day that feels the most changed. Things help. I call Jen more in the evenings now, which I think is a fair trade for years of her calling me when she was in college and needed something. I have a jigsaw puzzle going at the kitchen table, which is the most retirement sentence I've ever said, and I don't particularly care. It keeps my hands occupied and my mind just busy enough. My friend Ruth from the Tuesday study, we've started having dinner every other Wednesday. That started as a one-time thing and became something we both needed without either of us saying so directly. That's how the good things seem to happen, sideways, without announcement. The house question is still open. I'm leaving it open for now. I've learned that something can be an ongoing question without being a crisis. That's a thing the first year taught me that I didn't expect to need. The fifth thing is identity. And I want to say this carefully because it's the easiest one to get wrong. When people talk about losing yourself in retirement, they usually mean the job. You were a teacher for 37 years, and then you weren't. And you have to figure out who you are without that. I've had that conversation with myself. It's a real conversation. But for me, it was more layered than that. Because I lost the job identity in March 2021, and I had already lost, in October 2019, the active daily identity of being Frank's wife. Not the fact of it. I still think of myself as married to Frank, and I wear this ring, and I've done a whole video about that, which I'll link below. But the way of moving through the world as part of a pair, the we that I have to translate into I every single time I speak, and that translation is still not automatic. I still start sentences the old way and catch myself and correct them. 18 months in, I still do that. So in that first year, I was doing both things at once, figuring out who I am without the job and figuring out who I am without the partnership. I didn't get to do those one at a time. They came together, and some days that felt impossible, and some days, I don't know why, it felt like something that was just going to take as long as it took, and I was going to be okay. What I found, slowly, and I don't want to make it sound tidier than it was, because it wasn't tidy, is that there's a version of yourself that exists underneath the job title and underneath the marriage. I would not have said that with any confidence before 2021. I thought I knew who I was: teacher, Frank's wife, Jen and David's mother. Those things fully, completely, without much room left to examine what might be underneath them. When they got stripped back, one by one, I had to look at what was there. And what was there was more than I'd expected. I have preferences that are mine and not ours. Things I want to do that Frank would have found genuinely boring and said so politely. A version of me that exists when no one is watching and no job is calling and no role is asking to be filled. Finding that, slowly, with a lot of sitting in this chair, was some of the real work of that first year. The work I hadn't known to budget for. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's possible. I want to be precise about the difference. That was the first year, the honest version of it. I didn't come out the other side transformed. I came out tired and more capable than I'd expected, and still sad in the way that doesn't go away. It just changes shape, changes weight, becomes something you know how to carry rather than something that keeps surprising you with how heavy it is. Year 2 has had more good days than year 1 did. I notice that. I think noticing it matters. Frank would have had opinions about all of this. He would have had opinions about the roof repair and the national park and whether to sell the house, and probably about this channel, which I think he would have found slightly baffling at first and eventually come around to. He always came around. That was one of his better qualities, and he had several. Some days are better than others. That's still the most accurate thing I know how to say about any of this. Okay, I think that's what I wanted to say. If any part of this landed for you, leave me a comment. And be specific if you can. If you're in your first year right now, tell me what's the thing you're most not prepared for. Or if you're further along, tell me what you wish someone had said to you while you were in the middle of it. I find those comments more useful than almost anything else, and I read every one of them. If you want to stick around, I'll be here. That's what this is. We're all just figuring it out together. Thanks for being here.